Okay, so we're going to talk about selecting a topic and purpose. First, it's often difficult to decide where to start, and every book always lists brainstorming as just starting with some basic idea and then just branching out from there and making the little graph and the lines and the circles, which I've not found particularly helpful. What I found more useful is to go to just a personal inventory of just what are your interests. The best way to start is just think about what do you already know and like to talk about, and that makes it a lot easier to write a speech about. If all else fails and you just have no real interest, you feel you connect to the assignment or your audience, you can always go with something that is current. So, something that people may be at least tangentially familiar with, even if not know a lot of depth about. And it gives you just something that your audience would be familiar with that you can really inform or give them more information about. Of course, you can always go to an internet search, but if you don't know where to start, a lot of times that's not particularly helpful. In fact, if you were to turn to opening up a search and just putting in the terms persuasive speech topic, you'll find hundreds of sites with thousands of topics, which is just a list of nouns. It doesn't tell you what to do about them, what to think about them, and really you end up going back to even something a current topic or your personal inventory of what is it about that topic that interests you. So at the end of the day, the topics are really about you and what you're interested in. So as I said, trying to narrow it down, go with what you know. Don't take on, an advanced topic in genetics if you don't know the first thing about it. And it's hard to write and think about something that you don't care about. If you think back to a class which you've had to write an assignment or a paper over something that you really had no interest in, a lot of us struggle because I just can't find the motivation. So I don't want you to get stuck in this class because you don't care about the topic. So find something that is of interest to you. In a lot of ways, what makes it of interest to you is bringing your own perspective or your own take or your own experience with a particular topic. So, for instance, a speech about convincing people to stop smoking. Goodness, we've heard enough speeches and messages and ads and commercials and campaigns about that. Clearly, it's not working. What's different? What is it about your own experience that may be useful for you to maybe give a little bit of a different take or perspective or spin on that same old story? So a lot of times you can take something that is kind of old and make it fresh again based on what is your own perspective. And if you think about your audience is gonna be kind of selfish. They're going to be pretty self-centered because they want to know how this topic affects them. It's not that they don't care about other people, but we tune out when we don't know why the content is relevant to us. And so one of the things that you can do is you can take a national, even a global issue and outline local impacts, local ramifications, local consequences, and people really tune into that. So why would someone care about global warming because some island in the Pacific is going to go underwater? Well, I don't live on that island. Why do I care? Well, you're going to care because this is how it impacts the local fields and the local economy and jobs and so on and so forth, and people care a lot more about that. And if you can't determine what it is that your interests are, you can always give the people what they want. What do they want to hear? What are their interests? And then speak to that. And some of that may be that you're giving a perspective on a topic that is informing them or persuading them about something that may be embraced by your audience, but not necessarily by you. So, part of what your job is to do as a speaker is to do what is necessary, even if that's not something that is of interest to you, or maybe even not the perspective you would typically take. But after all of this is said and done, you really need to find something you feel like was worth your time. Did you feel like you spoke for 6 minutes and then what was the point of that? Or did you feel like you spoke for 6 minutes and really there should be something different about your audience? That the latter is how you should feel when you finish a speech. And so, similar to what I just sort of mentioned about selecting a topic, when you evaluate your topic, think about something that's appropriate for you. So, as a male, I'm probably not going to be best to give a speech about how women should be taking birth control. That's not appropriate for me. But you want to also think about what's appropriate for your audience. You don't want to go into a fourth grade class and start a sex ed talk. That may be too young, and school may be pretty upset about that. And also consider the occasion. I mean, if you're, walking into, a funeral and you're expected to give a eulogy, don't give a sales speech, right? So choose what's appropriate for the topic, and all of those constraints will also help narrow down what kinds of topics you may be able to use. But part of what your goal for the speech is will also strike some topics off the list. If your goal is simply to inform or to persuade, so to give information or to convince people, different kinds of topics are appropriate. You don't need to inform people that smoking is bad for your health. That is a known. And for some people, you wouldn't even have to necessarily convince them of that. It's the what do we do with that information? And so something like an informative speech may be about, explaining how the Earth's core creates the magnetic fields and why that's interesting. Right? That is something that people typically don't know. And a special occasion speech may be something like an introduction speech or a eulogy or a commemoration. And so those call for different kinds of topics. But when you go from that sort of general to persuade, to inform, to entertain, your specific purpose is very clearly what is it you want to persuade about. So you're talking about what the outcome is that you want to accomplish. And usually it is some sort of behavioral objective. So my audience will know this. My audience will go do this. And it should be a complete sentence, a declarative sentence, not a question, not something that is a fragment. It needs to be a complete thought. And it needs to be descriptive and specific, not my audience will vote. Vote for what, when, about. You need to have some details in there. And it should only be one thing. This isn't a list. My audience will be able to vote and know who the candidates are and feel like they're involved in a campaign. Those are three very different things, and that's not appropriate for one speech. So being able to say my audience will be able to is a great way to start your specific purpose. So a good example, my audience will be able to state some of the reasons for failing to graduate within 4 years. That is a behavioral outcome. You will be able to state these reasons. You will know them and be able to tell them to other people. It is very specific about why people fail within 4 years. An example that I've seen from a speech that wasn't a very good one was, why do students flunk out of college? If you're asking me the question, then why am I about to listen to you? You should be able to tell me. So rather than ask the question, what is the answer? That will end up being your specific purpose. The thesis is probably the most important sentence of the speech. It is the summary of the speech. It is the take-home line. If I remember nothing else, I remember the thesis. Everything about the speech is to support the thesis. It should be, again, a complete statement, a declarative, not a question. It should be a statement. Avoid the figurative language. This isn't the time for fancy showing off your creative writing skills. This is the cold hard facts. What do I need to know, and what will I get out of this speech? Be as specific as you can. My audience will what? So here is a nice table that I've seen going from a topic to a purpose to a thesis statement, and you can see with the different kinds of speeches. So starting with the informative presentation, the topic being wetlands ecology. So what is it that you want to know? I want to increase the audience's knowledge of wetland ecology. Okay, that's why you're giving a speech about this. This is what you hope to accomplish. What do you want me to know specifically? Puerto Rico's Caribbean National Forest is a national treasure. That is a statement that is very specific, that is about wetlands, that increases my knowledge, but it doesn't cover all of wetland ecology. The same with the persuasive presentation. You want to give a speech about the ethics of publicly held companies, and you want to convince the audience that publicly held companies have community responsibility. Still pretty broad, but specifically, U.S. businesses need to restore trust with the public. That is about having community responsibility, that addresses the overall topic of the ethics of publicly held companies. So it starts very broad with the topic, gets a little more focused in the purpose, and then is extremely focused in the thesis. So I know exactly the one thing that you want me to know at the end of your speech.